people say all to me also, why am I so nitpicky? You know, why don't you enjoy life? I go, I enjoy being smart and energetic and strong and looking so much younger than my wife and my friends. I like that, okay? I don't need to eat crap food. I don't need this pizza or this other crap. I want to stay healthy because all day long, all I see is demented, sick people. Amputation, open heart surgery, demented, intracranial bleed, nonstop all day long. So I don't want to end up like all these poor people. I want to age well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Sen, and today I have the honor of having back on our monthly guest, Dr. Peter Rogers. He is a Stanford and Harvard-educated neuroradiologist and imaging-guided surgeon who has worked for over 30 years. And on his own YouTube channel, he lectures on topics like nutrition, toxicology, and more. Today, we'll be covering many questions on these topics, including those submitted ahead of time by the audience. So the first question was, does a vegan starch-heavy diet run the risk of causing more anemia than an omnivorous diet?
Well, there's going to be less absorption of iron when it's a plant-based iron compared to a heme iron. So heme iron is within this big molecule called a protoporphyrin. It's right in the center, and it's very highly absorbed. Let's say in the ballpark of 50%, whereas plant irons use only about 10% absorbed, and the gut is more able to vary its percent absorption of plant iron. The main group of persons who get labeled as being anemic is young women, because when a woman hits puberty, she gets a double whammy. She's growing rapidly, so she needs more iron, but simultaneously she starts menstruating, so she drops her iron supply. And they used to call anemia, iron deficiency anemia, a sickness of virgins, because it'd be the young virgin female simultaneously in puberty and growing rapidly that would become anemic. But most of these iron biochemists, they all say, iron deficiency anemia is overtreated. And don't get me wrong, in our ancestors who maybe only ate plant foods and often were starving, it might have been a little harder to get iron, but it's relatively uncommon as a problem in modern persons. And the question of it is, where do you set the lower threshold for diagnosing it, and where do you set it for treating it? And I can tell you, all these iron experts, every single one of them that I read the book said it is markedly overtreated. So I'd be a little careful with that, supplementing with iron. Plus, the iron that goes into supplements a lot of times will be inorganic iron, just the iron isolated itself. Nowadays, too, they iron supplement a lot of foods. They enrich them, so to speak, the grains and the cereals, and they just like file off a piece of iron off a piece of metal, okay? It's not really a healthy food, okay? If a person really is iron, you know, maybe somebody's got, you know, unusual reasons for heavy menstruation. You know, in an older person, you worry about, are they bleeding from a colon cancer, for example? But all I can say is, if the person feels really good and they're athletic and they're energetic, everything's fine with them, I wouldn't worry about it too much. That's probably a decent iron level for them.
Okay, so what if they do happen to have like low ferritin levels and they're feeling lethargic and weak? Would you say in that case, just load up on more iron-rich foods?
Well, if they truly were low in iron, then I would go through all the plant foods and see which ones have the most iron to supply. And I would always try to get stuff from diet if you can. Because when you start messing around with iron supplements, usually it's not going to be the best thing you could get. But I don't have that much experience in treating iron deficiency. You know, when I recently had studied it, I was most interested in iron overload, because that's far more common, and that's a big deal. So yeah, I would just say find the plants. I would look up what foods contain the most iron, the plant foods, you know, things like spinach has a lot of iron, for example, and eat it organic, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. Someone else wanted to know what kind of skin moisturizer they should use.
Now, that one I don't really know too well. I'm not a big fan of those things. You know, staying well hydrated kind of adds to the glow of vitality in one's skin. There's a whole bunch of dermatology YouTube channels, and they love talking about that kind of stuff. The big pitfall is that most moisturizers, most personal care products, they tend to have lots of estrogenic preservatives. And usually at least one, probably two, sometimes three of them. So I'd be a little careful about that. I don't like putting stuff on myself, okay? You know, and there's the old joke, Rodney Dangerfield, there's a fine line between rubbing lotion on yourself and rubbing yourself with lotion. Now, I'm just kidding, but all I'm saying is I would try to avoid those moisturizers if I could. You know, try to figure out why you're having the dryness of skin or the eczema or something. Maybe you could figure that out. Maybe it's because of your laundry detergent. I don't even use laundry detergent because it's full of estrogen, typical laundry estrogen. The bottle's BPA, that's estrogenic, bisphenol A. Then it contains some type of nonylphenol or something, estrogenic soap. Then typically the plastic conditioner for the bottle is going to be a phthalate, that's estrogenic. The dryer squares are estrogenic. So that's 4 estrogen exposures on your clothing. that you don't have any first pass detox effect going through your liver, like when you eat something. So all day long, you're exposing yourself to estrogens in that sense. But basically, the bottom line about skin moisturizers is I don't know.
So if you're experiencing dry skin, what do you do?
Well, I don't have too much of a problem. Well, one thing is I try not to wash my hands too much. I think people wash their hands too much. And like, for example, when I was working as an imaging guided surgeon, I had noticed that lots of these technologists hardly ever wash their hands. They maybe rinse them off, between cases, but they're not obsessive compulsive about a lot. And I had first came out, there's all these patients. I had to do surgery on a lot of patients with hepatitis, HIV, you name it. And I was in the hand of washing my hands too much. And my skin was starting to flake off a little bit. And then I had some family members making fun of me. Like when I first studied pathology, all the disease, my mother said, "Oh, you're like the boy who couldn't stop washing," because there was some movie about that, whatever that was. And she was mocking me. And then my wife mocked me too. She goes, "You think you're so smart? You're a dumbass. All you do is wash your hands all the time. You're washing off your skin barrier. You're going to get one of these diseases. And that tech who doesn't wash their hands, they're not going to get it, but you're going to get it." So, so I stopped washing my hands so much. But otherwise, I don't know why. My skin doesn't usually get too dry except if I wash my hands too much. So you don't need to wash that much. Okay, the other thing in my house that would happen is I'm often reading a book or working on a computer. So I want my hands clean and dry. Whereas there's people in my family, in my opinion, that eat like slobs. They'll eat all this finger food, fried food or whatever, and then they slime the door handles. So I would open the door handle with a paper towel. And they'll go, "Oh, you're such a chicken. You can't even open a door. How could you do surgery when you're scared to open a door? Ooh, germs," all this silly, stupid talk. But what I'm trying to say, no, it's not because of germs, because you're a slob, okay? You slime the doorknob, all right? I don't want to touch my book or computer after that. Then I have to wash my hands again. So by not touching it, I don't have to wash my hands again. I think a lot of people are still into these cleaning chemicals. Again, they're doing the same thing of wiping off their skin barrier. But I know some people have a generalized dryness in more areas than just their hands. And I would look into what might be causing that. Is that part of an autoimmune disorder? Is it part of a chemical exposure from the laundry detergent you're using or some other cosmetic product? I don't know.
Gotcha. And speaking of autoimmune conditions, one of our viewers suffers from Raynaud syndrome, which causes your fingers to get white, they get so cold. And he was wondering, is there any correlation between this condition and having high blood pressure? Does that cause it?
It might be. The association would be that beta blockers, a common medication used to treat high blood pressure, will sometimes cause Raynaud's. So if the patient's got Raynaud's, and maybe they could try different medicine, or better yet, go low fat, low sodium vegan and probably cure their high blood pressure. McDougall and Pritikin would say that at least 90% of their patients will come off all their meds for treatment of hypertension. The less chronic the hypertension is, the more likely of complete reversibility. After you've had it 15, 20 years, you got some scarring in the arteries, some collagenization of the arteries and fibrosis and calcification. You might not reverse that, but you got a decent chance. And so I would try. Other medicines can do it too. Pulmonary hypertension could do it. And Raynaud's is associated with a whole bunch of autoimmune diseases, all the lupus, scleroderma, all that stuff. Most of those are due to leaky gut. And so what do? You eat low fat, low sodium vegan, and you filter your water. I made a whole list of things that cause leaky gut. I go through that systematically and avoid every single one. It can also be post-traumatic. Somebody like a workman working with a jackhammer. I got transient Raynaud's in my finger one time. It was because of a cold blue situation. I ran over there, had to intubate a patient, and then I asked the tech to hand me the epi, and inadvertently, in the process of handing to me, they injected my finger. So I got a full dose epi injected into my finger, So I ran over to the vascular surgeon, I was afraid, or the hand surgeon too. I was afraid I was going to get amputated. They go, "Just soak it in hot water." So I soaked it in hot water like all day long. I took the rest of the day off. And it hurt for about a year and a half, but I didn't lose my finger. And gradually the circulation came back. By eating low fat, low sodium vegan, you optimize the circulation. You'll regrow your collaterals. I'd often have to wear an extra glove on there. If all of a sudden I got cold, it would hurt. I'd put my fingers in my armpits to warm them up real fast. If I didn't have gloves, if I was caught unexpectedly, like say you go to some place, a restaurant or something, you're like, "Oh my God, it's freezing in here. There's too much air conditioning." That's a way you can real quick warm up your hands. But I would often wear gloves. And just try to stay warm in general. I'd be likely to wear my coat a little more, my scarf, my hat, because you want to stay warm. Cold climates will precipitate events. And avoid any medicine that has like a sympathetic effect. Some of these appetite suppressants will have that type of effect. Dextroamphetamine was a typical appetite suppressant. Or those migraine medicines often have ergotamines. which are sympathomimetic drugs. So those are the kind of things that can do it. That's pretty much the main stuff.
It's really interesting. I had no idea that some of the medications that people can take can trigger that. That's yeah.
Yeah, vasoconstriction is like a sympathetic effect. So something that mimics a sympathetic effect could do it. It's a little weird that beta blockers do it, but they're blocking the vasoconstrictive component of the sympathetic effect.
Gotcha. We have another viewer who's concerned about vaping and the rise of vaping.
Yeah, vaping's
And
for idiots. Don't do it. It's stupid. Okay. You're inhaling smoke. You not only get the toxic chemicals in the smoke is hot. You could burn a hole in your lung. Okay. When you look at a CAT scan of a patient who smokes, they got all these holes in their lung. It's called emphysema. They're just destroying their lung tissue. It's absolutely stupid. You know, life is difficult enough without being short of breath all the time.
yeah, do you think like passive vaping is harmful when you're near other people doing it?
That's probably relatively minor effect, but it's still best to avoid it. It stinks up the place. You know, you're in a car where people are smoking, the car stinks. You're in a house where people smoke, the house stinks. I had a girlfriend one time who started smoking, and man, she stunk. You know, a nice, pretty girl. And it's like she stinks. Her whole body smells like a cigarette. It's kind of disgusting.
Yeah. In another one of your videos, you mentioned how having a root canal is problematic, and the person was wondering why.
Well, let's say you have a tooth, and at the bottom of the tooth where it implants into the jaw, the mandible, you'll sometimes get a little infection. So that's the apex of the tooth. So it's called a periapical abscess. So here's your tooth. Imagine this is where the tooth extends down into the roots of it, into the mandible. And you'll sometimes get an infection right there, a periapical dental abscess. All right, what they'll do is they'll drill out the tooth and they'll go down into these canals. And they're typically bifurcated, but there can be additional accessory canals. They'll try to drain the abscess, and then they'll fill it in with some type of bone cement, like a gutta percha or something. But the relevance is, let's say there's an extra canal they didn't see. There's 3 of them instead of 2. I don't know if that makes sense. And they forget to drill one out, and it's infected. You'll have a chronic infection sitting in there, and that can intermittently seed the blood with infectious material. I don't know how bad it is, but there's dentists who've written books about this. There's a cardiologist who wrote a book about it. I think Hal Huggins was the dentist, and I think Levy is the name of the cardiologist. And in their opinion, it causes chronic inflammation that increases atherosclerosis. I personally think it's not that major a contributor to atherosclerosis. The reason I say that is, like, one of the arguments given is they're going to say, well, we find bacteria in a lot of atherosclerotic plaques. My opinion about bacteria and atherosclerotic plaques is I believe that they are saprophytic, meaning they see damaged tissue and they go in there and they eat it. And by that, I mean bacteria need iron to grow. Atherosclerosis is actually a blood clot, okay? And over time, it chronically becomes organized, partially reabsorbs, or becomes calcified. So what I'm basically saying is, if you're a bacteria floating around in the blood, you go, hey, there's a big blood clot over there. We can eat it, okay? They can't eat the live cells. The iron is free and accessible and available inside a blood clot. So what I'm saying is, they're saprophytic. A lot of them don't have it. And then you say, well, how could I be so sure? There's multiple reasons. First of all, they don't always find those bacteria. They don't always find the same one. Secondly, Esselstyn cured all these patients by just putting them on a vegan diet. He didn't give them any antibiotics. You don't need antibiotics to treat atherosclerosis. Okay, I'm a big believer in the so-called terrain theory, okay, rather than the germ theory. Don't get me wrong. They're both relevant. They both have an important role. But what I'm trying to say is, people who have good diets and good health and stress management, they hardly ever get sick, okay? In a modern world, we're pretty lucky. We're not exposed to that much stuff compared to, let's say, 500 years ago or something. So I think that it's best to take care of your teeth. And I think it's also best to try to avoid surgery if you can. But you might need it. But that's why root canals are thought to be bad. A chronic infection that can't be cured because you don't have good vascular blood supply access to it to get your immune system to it, and it just intermittently gets transient contact with the blood and seeds it with chronic infected and endotoxins and whatnot related to the bacteria.
I see. So if some dentist is pushing somebody to get a root canal, you'd say just explore all other options first before going for that?
That's what I would recommend. And what type of materials are going to be put in there? How certain can they be that they're not going to have a problem, draining it? Because I worry there can be accessory canals that they miss. Equipment can break off inside of there. The person can be hypersensitive to the materials used. In the old days, they used to fill the teeth with dental amalgams, which contained mercury, okay, like a major neurotoxin. So I would do what you can to avoid it if that's possible. Usually people who eat a plant-based diet, and avoid sweets and avoid acidic things. Soda pop, orange juice. I don't like carbonated water. Anyways, if you avoid all that stuff, you're unlikely to ever get cavities. What I do after a meal is I always rinse my mouth with water, and then I'll use those interdental brushes and I'll floss. Especially at night, you want to floss because your saliva production decreases at night, so that's when you're most vulnerable to getting a cavity. If you're leaving sweet and acidic food in your mouth at night and you don't brush, you don't clean it out, then you don't got the saliva there. Saliva is full of antibacterial chemicals. Then that will predispose you to dental decay and all these problems. I can also tell you, I look at brains all the time with demented people. I almost don't even have to look at the CT. I can tell you what the case is going to show. The patient is going to have at least one, if not bilateral cataract surgery, and they're going to have poor dentition. They're usually missing all of their teeth or almost all of them. So a person who doesn't take care of their teeth, they're simultaneously getting more leaky gut, all this postprandial endotoxemia and stuff, dormant bacteria. They're heading towards dementia. And the same stuff that happens in the eye, it happens in the brain. The eye is kind of like part of the brain. So when somebody's got glaucoma, diabetic retinopathy, hypertensive retinopathy, and cataracts, watch out, because they might have some major simultaneous things going on in the brain. It often will precede the cataract, 5, 10, or 15 years before the dementia.
Wow, that's very fascinating. Somebody else wants to know, are portable space heaters harmful? You talk a lot about radiation. Does the radiation?
Oh, yeah, I would watch out. I would try to study what's the mechanism by which it works. Now, I should have looked this one up, but I do know in the past I've used some space heaters. If it smells funny, that's bad. Anything that smells bad is bad for you in general. That's in general true. So if it's coming up with a funny smell, I wouldn't like that. And be careful, how does it work? Try to study the mechanism before you buy it, that there's not something toxic about it. But you know what? I don't know space heaters that well, but I would watch out for those things. And yeah, I wouldn't want it to be like right next to me. Is it giving off a lot of EMF, electromotive force or something? So I wouldn't sleep with the thing by your head. You know what I'm saying? And if it makes a noise, hopefully it'll be a pleasant, mild, consistent noise. I don't like really loud noises. You can't turn your ears off. You know what I mean? I wonder if some people are going to go deaf. Like some people like a so-called white noise, and you can maybe have that because your family's making too much noise and they're annoying you. But be a little careful about making it too loud. Do what you got to do. But I worry about going deaf. And does that have a chronic stress effect on yourself?
Yeah. We also have a lot of coffee drinkers in the audience, and someone was saying that they acknowledge that caffeine causes vasoconstriction, that increases your blood pressure. He wonders, how long do those effects on blood pressure last, and what are the long-term effects of a coffee addiction?
Well, caffeine has a half-life about 6 to 8 hours, so that will often still be partially on board when you go to bed. Even if you drink it in the morning, you'll have a tendency not to sleep as deep. I used to drink 1 or 2 cups of coffee every day for about 20 years. I started doing it when I was in residency. I was on call. I was up late at night, and that was a bad habit. And then you become addicted to it. And it also would interfere with me. Like I'd have to go do a case. Let's say I have to do some type of imaging-guided surgery. All right. And I would often tell the tech, hold on a sec, I got to go get my coffee first. So I would find that I wouldn't want to skip my coffee because then I get withdrawal headaches because it's a vasoconstrictor. It decreases blood supply to the brain. I don't like that. When you're 20 years old, you got such great blood supply, it's not a big deal. But over time, I came up with the Rogers theory of neurovascular uncoupling. So what that means is you've got a baseline metabolic activity in your neurons, and then you've got an oxygen glucose delivery. Well, when you drink caffeine, you are dropping the blood delivery to your brain a little bit, okay? Then let's say it's about 15%. Some papers say as high as 27%. Well, let's say it's about 15%. Simultaneously, you got the caffeine, which increases, it's like psychological stress. It increases glutamate transmission in the neuron. So now you're raising your metabolic rate. So you get a wider gap between your metabolic activity in that neuron and the blood supply. As this gap gets too wide, these neurons start dying. So don't get me wrong. You're 20, 30 years old. You're pretty healthy. Just a little bit of caffeine, 2 or 3 cups a day. I don't think you're going to be losing too many brain cells. But where it starts kicking in is now you're getting a little older. You're eating a high-fat meal with some sodium in there, okay? Let's say you eat a cheeseburger or whatever. Now you got the high fat's going to drop your oxygen delivery, let's say 15, 20% to these neurons. Well, that's making things worse. And then the salt's going to vasoconstrict. So now you're getting a wider and wider gap. Now you're going to start losing brain cells. And you don't become demented overnight in one day. But for a couple decades of that, I see lots of people, they're mentally slow and stupid in their 50s. And certainly tons of them in their 60s. I've had internal medicine doctor friends who tell me every single one of their patients over 60 is cognitively impaired. They start becoming like cows. Hi, thank you, kind of slow and stupid. Believe me, there's tons of people like that. And I think the Western diet makes people turn into that.
Yeah.
And it's multifactorial. There's other things harming them. They get obstructive sleep apnea, the diabetic related stuff, but it's all part of that trend. So my advice is quit the caffeine, quit the coffee. You don't need it. I quit mine, I don't know, about 5 years ago or something. I feel much better not being done with it. I used to get this rebound tiredness in the afternoons. So you get a little bit of a jolt from it in the morning for a couple of hours, but then I get a rebound dullness later in the day. Also, when I quit the coffee, I tapered it off 25% less each day for about 4 days to come off a cup and 1 week. And then at first, when I was drinking 2 cups a day for about 15 years. After I quit the first cup, I felt okay. Not much of a difference. A little transient mouth headache, but nothing bad. Then when I quit the second cup, after I quit that, I felt sad for about 3 days. And that's because I, withdrawal of that neurotransmitter, okay? And my receptors for the glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter, look like 70% of the neurotransmitter entire brain excitatory. So that means it activates the postsynaptic neuron. Then I was like sad for about 3 days. Then I had cravings for about 2.5 weeks or so. And I kind of missed it. But after that, I was so glad to be done with it. Now I got more energy all through the day. I don't ever need to interrupt what I'm doing. Let's say I got to go do a procedure. I just go do the procedure. So it no longer disrupts my schedule. I'm very happy to be done with it. Once you get past those cravings, which can take 2 weeks to a month or so, you'll be much happier being done with it. And it doesn't affect me at all. I thought, will I not be as smart? Will I not be as energetic? Will I be weaker in the weight room? Will I not be as clever and funny when I'm trying to write a book chapter? No, nothing really changed. I'm just glad to be done with it.
That's fabulous. We have some people who also like to drink tea a lot. And someone was wondering, is matcha healthy? Matcha is literally just the tea leaves ground up. And it could, so they say it's technically a whole food.
Yeah, I'm going to go into the tea, and tea has a lot of caffeine, including matcha. Matcha has more caffeine than the other types of tea. It's got more than twice as much. Last couple things of caffeine. So it raises your blood pressure. You don't want that. It increases your blood lipids, okay, your blood glucose, because that's what the acute stress response does. Plus, a lot of people say, I'm so stressed up, I need a cup of coffee. Well, that's stupid, because it increases your stress response. If you're stressed, you don't want to add your stress response. It's the same two hormones are elevated, the cortisol and the catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, same thing as adrenaline, noradrenaline. So, and then you get into a vicious cycle because it's lessening your sleep. When you're stressed out, you make yourself more stressed out. Part of how you recover from anything is sleeping. Our body heals best during sleep. So you get yourself in this chronic negative cycle. You also predispose yourself to being anxious. Also, when an animal is encountered with a dangerous situation, it's like fight or flight, fight, flight, or freeze. Okay, well, what I'm trying to say is you get less blood supply to the thinking part of your brain, the cognitive, thoughtful part of the brain. The brain, you can look at it like a fist. Let's see if I can make a fist here. I want to show my thumb. I'm trying to get it into the webcam. Okay, here's the temporal lobe, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe. And then here's the brainstem coming up from below. So you got 3 parts to your brain, all right? The brainstem from below is your primitive reptile brain, and that is just instinctual. I want food. All right. And it's just like the id of Freud's id, ego, superego. Whereas the next step up is something that looks like the Chicago Bears letter C on a helmet. That's called the limbic system. And that's also called the mammal brain. The idea is theoretically, from an evolutionary perspective, the reptilian brain, spinal cord, and primitive brain just for autonomic stuff, to maintain a heartbeat, a blood pressure. And then built on top of it as a limbic system. And that is a mammalian brain, which is quick, instinctual. It knows enough to take care of a family, nurse the baby, take care of the baby, but it really doesn't think a whole lot. Okay, so that's your mammalian reactive limbic brain. That's the one you use when you're stressed out. An antelope says, oh shit, there's a lion, run, okay? Or maybe jump up, stop, to show that you're the fast one, so it better not try waste its time catching you. All right, well, the point is, you revert to more of a stressed out, reactive, impulsive personality when you've got caffeine on board, all right? Versus as you get older, you become more nuanced, more sophisticated. You want to be thoughtful. When somebody says something to you that you don't like, an insult or something very rude or inappropriate or whatever, a young person gets pissed off. Whereas an older person says, wow, this person's a dumbass, okay? And it's coming from the other person, not from you. And what I mean by that is, having more caffeine on board, you're more likely to react impulsively and say something you'll regret later. and also you will write better, you will think better when you're working on your frontal lobes, because your frontal lobe is the human personality. It's the more sophisticated part of your brain. It has the ability to detect nuance, the ability to delay gratification, the ability to think about the long-term consequences or perspectives on any behavior option. So what I'm saying is you want to be in that frontal lobe, human, high-level functioning primate brain as much as you can. And caffeine pushes you into more of a mammalian reactive impulsive brain. Now, if you're just about to lift weights, some people have said when they're going for their personal rep maximum, they might like a little caffeine on board. Maybe that's true, okay? But what I'm saying is on a day-to-day basis, most of us have to interact with other people, and you want to be able to be thoughtful, you know? And so, for example, like an older person, when they deal with a rude, obnoxious person, they're just polite. Okay, I understand. And then you walk away and you avoid them, okay? Versus a young person will often be offended and, you know, argue with them or something, which is a waste of time. Okay, you're now getting to the matcha. The matcha tea, it's more green. It sounds like it's probably better than the other teas in that sense. I still don't like it because you're still ingesting caffeine. I mean, it's not as much as coffee, but you're still ingesting caffeine. Yeah, I looked up the book. Pretty good book. It's called, let me put it by the webcam. Food Forensics.
Food Forensics.
Oh, yeah, I should have held it back, and now I'm going to screw up the focus. All right, well, anyways, it's Food Forensics by Mike Adams. And the point is, he'll go on page 220. He has all these charts of the amount of contaminants in different foods. He's got tons of pages of charts. Anyways, he talks about tea. Basically, green tea was the best of the teas. Out of all the teas that he tested, the green tea had the least amount of aluminum. Still had more than I would want, but it was the lowest. And it had very low levels of cadmium and lead. So it was the best of the teas. He has a tendency to concentrate aluminum, fluoride, and lead. Not good. I think it's kind of stupid, my personal opinion. Now, don't get me wrong. This matcha green tea stuff is better than the other ones. I personally say, what do I need it for? If I want something green, I'll just eat the green vegetable. What do I need this tea for? So I know though how people are, though. I got people in my family who drink tea, and they have this attitude, oh no, not my tea. My tea is the best tea. And I'm like, yeah, right. You know what? And I'm like, also, you know, I'm your father who loves you, who studies nutrition all the time, who reads about food toxicology, and I'm trying to help you. And you don't believe me, but you believe some stupid commercial on the internet. You know, you just flunked your instant IQ test, okay? But I run into that sort of thing. Also, I had a botany professor when I was at Stanford. I think his name was Dr. Thomas. And he said, some of these popular teas are not so good, but some of these herbal teas will kill you. And he was kind of kidding around, but the point was, he would go through all the ingredients, and he says a lot of people don't even know what's in there, you know. So all I'm saying is be careful. The more ingredients, the worse something is. Usually the best foods is just one thing, you know. This is a blueberry, this is a potato. That's the best food, you know. Something where it's got all these, like a biochemistry chart, and you can't even pronounce it, or you don't know what the things are. I would avoid all those things. I don't eat any food that's got more than one ingredient. The only semi-processed thing I eat is plain oatmeal and plain quinoa.
Wow. So is there anything you cheat on, like any food or substance?
Not really. Like, let's say somebody cooks for me. If they put a little salt on my sweet potatoes, I'll eat them. You know, I'm just glad they're cooking for me, because in a sense, what am I doing? They're saving me time. I like it when people save me time. So I'll eat the sweet potatoes, even if they put salt on them. It's not that big of a deal, but that's about it. And people say all to me also, why am I so nitpicky? You know, why don't you enjoy life? I go, I enjoy being smart and energetic and strong and looking so much younger than my wife and my friends. I like that, okay? I don't need to eat crap food. I don't need this pizza or this other crap. So I want to stay healthy, because all day long, all I see is demented, sick people. Amputation, open heart surgery, demented, intracranial bleed, nonstop all day long. So I don't want to end up like all these poor people. It's not in that. Most people don't age well. Plus, I got all my doctor friends. A lot of them, they look real old. Okay, they're not aging well. All right, so I want to age well. And plus, I'm a big fan of authors. I read tons of biographies of authors, and I would notice the pattern in their writing. Many of them, they lose a step in their 60s and another step in their 70s because they're not healthy. So, you know, you could tell when a writer's good. They surprise you. They've got metaphors that surprise you. Like, oh, yeah, that's right. Or that's funny. I get it. You know, but when a writer starts losing it, all of a sudden there's all this boring pablum of stuff you already know that's obvious. And it's like they're losing that ability to write in an interesting way.
So even right now, there's nothing you really crave that you technically shouldn't have.
No, I'm still eating. I eat an OMAD diet on my days off. I'm sorry, I eat an OMAD diet on my work days. Just at night, I eat a big dinner. And then on my work day, on my days off, I'll eat twice a day, a late lunch and a late dinner. And I only eat the OMAD on work days because it's convenient. If you eat once a day, you save a lot of time. On a day like today, it's real sunny. I'll go outside, I'll eat, my lunch out in the sun because I want to get my vitamin D and I like the sunshine. I think it energizes the person to get some sun. But I'm pretty happy with it. No, I don't need anything. I know this nutrition pathophysiology pretty well, and it's sort of like, I'm only going to do what's good for me. Why would I want to, let's say here's a line, above is good for you, below is bad. Why would I ever want to do anything that's bad for me?
Yeah.
It's all what tastes good. There's enough sugar or whatever else in my fruits and vegetables and starches. I don't need to ever break those rules. And also, if you start getting in the habit of a so-called cheat day, you'll start to crave that food. You'll always wish it. You'll have that longing for it. Whereas I don't. I'm very happy to eat the food that I eat, which is just, the so-called Spartan vegan diet.
Yeah, fabulous. And a lot of people struggle when they're on this diet and say like a family member makes some like really creamy pie and says, I made this just for you, have it. How do you deal with that?
Well, my family members know that I just don't eat that stuff. Okay, so they won't make it for me. Like, let's say Thanksgiving, we went and visited, some relatives and stuff, friends of the family. And so they really didn't have much for me. I just did the best I could. I ate the asparagus, even though it was a little bit dipped in oil. I didn't really want that. I ate the potatoes, even though there was a little bit of butter on it, even though I didn't want it. It was the best I could do for that day. And I only, and I kind of finished that off real fast. And then when I went home, I ate some more on my own, but I wouldn't eat any of the other stuff. So you do the best you can, but it's not that often that I eat out. If I'm going to go to a restaurant, let's say I have to go to a restaurant, it's a special event, I'll just eat the fruits. A lot of times I'll have a fruit off. Whatever is the plant, low-fat plants, that's what I'll eat.
Yeah, very smart. All right. Another medical question. Someone is asking, what are your thoughts on fevers? Are they really that helpful for healing from infections, or are they more trouble than they're worth generally? Should they be left alone unless reaching the danger zone?
Well, mild fevers are often helpful because the immune system functions better under hot conditions. That's why it causes the fever, so the immune system can function better. If it gets much higher, then you start worrying about it. Maybe you'll do some of the other things, take a cool bath. Maybe you do all this Tylenol stuff. But I kind of think that a lot of this, I'm not a pediatrician, okay, and I'm not an expert on the subject, but I just think in general, a lot of this, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory alternating with Tylenol, I think a lot of that's overrated, but I'm not a pediatrician. All I'm saying is the body's a lot smarter than we are. Like the biochemistry of the human body, it's a million times more complicated than any of the pharmacology chemistry. And so in general, you should trust your body to know what it's doing. Rare situations happen. Somebody could be in a super high fever, but that's rare. Okay. Mild fever is common and it's probably helping you to get better.
Gotcha. And the person who asked this says that he and his children regularly, when they're sick, they will get quite high fevers in that danger threshold. And would you say that this is genetic?
I don't know. I would say try to find a good pediatrician, someone who's really thought about it a lot and studied it from multiple different perspectives. So it's hard for me to answer that. I don't know.
Got it. And someone else was asking, what are your future content plans for your YouTube channel, if you have any?
Well, I sort of just go with whatever grabs my interest. The way this started out is my kids are, for the most part, grown up now. I don't spend that much time with my wife and she works. So I'd be sitting around at home and I go, what am I going to do today? I go, you know what? I want to try to, because I got all these dementia patients. I kind of want it. And I'm the doctor that teaches the other doctors. Okay. They all come to me to teach, and I give lectures on diet. I give lectures on all this dementia, all kinds of brain topics, especially in the pathophysiology of brain diseases. So I'd ask myself a question: what causes diabetes? And then I would start reading all the papers. I'd read all the textbooks, and I'm like, holy crap, all the books are wrong. They're all completely wrong. Okay. And you say, oh, am I just being arrogant? No, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And then I go, well, then I try to understand atherosclerosis. All of the standard textbooks, they're all wrong. I can tell you this, all the major universities, when it comes to the understanding of diabetes, atherosclerosis, the common disease, they're all a joke. I would not take them seriously. For anything called chronic disease, what that means is they never cure it, which means that they don't understand it. Usually if you understand a disease, especially if you catch it early, you can cure it. And so what I'm trying to say here is I kind of realized, I had a very strong background in biochemistry and whatnot. I was like the best student in the whole United States in biochemistry when I was in medical school. I said, well, gosh, I can understand these books. I can understand these diseases. I should do this more often. I wrote a book, but nobody reads. So then I started making my YouTube channel. I'm like, well, I'm just going to make some videos. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? And I don't get that many views, but I know I'm right. Okay. And you can say, well, how do you know you're right? Well, it's obvious. Look at coronary artery disease. The standard textbook, they never cure it. They say, give a statin, then put a stent in, then do a coronary, artery bypass, open heart surgery. The cure rate in terms of the all-cause mortality has zero benefit essentially for stents or for open heart surgery, but they're big money makers. About $30,000 for stents, about $120,000 billing for the open heart surgery. You don't make any money if the patient just goes low-fat vegan. So what I'm trying to say is that's the typical story for coronary, but it was the same thing for almost everything else. I'm like, holy shit. Wow, this is good to know. And I was also pissed off because my mother died of cancer. I didn't know any of this nutritional stuff. It might have helped her. My father had open heart surgery. And then 4 years later, he had a stroke. They tied the left internal mammary artery down to the heart. It's called a lima to the LAD, left anterior descending artery. So lima is left internal mammary artery to the left anterior descending artery. And they stapled the arteries. And so what happened is he's throwing snow over his shoulder and he dissected its vertebral artery, caused a clot, threw it up to his brain, and had a stroke. And what I'm saying is if he didn't have the lima to the LAD stapled in, so it was fixed and it couldn't move with his motion, when he threw the snow over his shoulder, he wouldn't have stroked out. He wouldn't have dissected the artery and stroke. And it pissed me off because I didn't want him to have the open heart surgery. I told him to go vegan, but it was many, many years ago. Gosh, it was like over 25 years ago. And, I kind of knew about Ornish, but I hadn't read Esselstyn yet. And so I didn't come down hard enough. The cardiologist and cardiac surgeons, no, he needs surgery. He's got a widowmaker. He's got to go to the OR. And don't get me wrong, he went to the best surgeon. He was fine for 4 years, but he dissected his vert, which I think is because of that. So what I'm trying to say is, I also, I wanted to be a great doctor. I didn't just go into medicine to make money or because I wanted to have a good life. I wanted to become a great doctor, sort of like to make up for, in my own mind, getting injured and screwing up my athletic career, because I would have had a great athletic career and I really liked that. So anyways, what I'm trying to say was, I'm like, holy shit, I can figure out all these diseases. And, I came across McDougall and some of the other great ones, like, Campbell on the animal protein, etc. And so I'm like, well, gosh, I can understand these as well, or better than anyone else in the whole world. I might as well make a YouTube channel about it. Nobody reads my books. Maybe some people go to my YouTube channel. And that's pretty much how things are. Like, I'll have an observation and I'll read about it, think about it, or talk to other persons about it. And this information is not in any of the books. Like, for example, I'm thinking about thyroid cancer yesterday. I do tons of thyroid biopsies. And I'm like, you know what? We do what we can with this stuff, but I don't ever see anybody die from thyroid cancer in 20-something years. I've only seen one patient with widespread lung mets from thyroid cancer. And I've seen a few patients get neck lymph node mets. So basically, I felt that this is something to share with the world. The other thing too is, I noticed too that there's a tendency, especially amongst young people, I notice in my kids, the music they listen to, I think it's terrible, this loud beat music. I don't like loud bump, 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 bump music because you can't think. A lot of times I'm carrying an idea around in my head. Why does that happen? What is happening in the endothelium? How does the atherosclerotic plaque become subintimal? I'm thinking. And so when I hear boom, 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 I'm like, I can't think. Don't play that music so loud around me, okay? And so they don't have much awareness of culture, of literature, of art. And I think that if a person doesn't learn something about that, in a sense, they become dehumanized a little bit. They become, it has an ennobling effect to read good books, to study good things, to do good things. And so if you only go with pop culture, it sort of vulgarizes you, if you will. Okay. And all I'm saying is one of the things I wanted to do on my YouTube channel was to show good art, to show appreciation of good music, so that if someone's interested, they could find it there. And I also figured, the race between the turtle and the rabbit, I'm the turtle. Okay. I don't have any time to do search engine optimization. I don't do any of that stuff. I don't have any marketing, just by myself. When I get a free moment, I make a video. And I figure I'll accumulate them. I got like over 670 videos. And there's more good content there than there is at any of these professional health websites. They're all full of shit. They're all trying to sell drugs, okay? You go to any foundation, it's always, we don't know what causes it. Just take our drug and hope for the best. Yeah, bullshit, study the disease. Study any disease. Look at the patterns of epidemiology. Where does it occur? How come it occurs in one place, not in the other? What's the difference in their behavior, their diet, or whatever? And you can a lot of times figure out most of these diseases. Not always, but quite often, all the common ones. So anyways, that's pretty much what I do. So I'll just continue trying to produce good content. And I'm trying to make a great site. I sort of feel like I can't make my site popular. I just don't have the resources. I don't have the time. I work 5 days a week. But I do know I can make it great. And so that's what I'm going to do.
You definitely do. My Zoom background right now is Thomas Hudson's painting, The Architect's Dream. He was part of the Hudson River School and oh sorry, Thomas Cole is his name. And I really love classical art and studied a lot of it growing up, painted a lot too. Your videos were what brought back to me appreciation of art because it had been sort of dormant for a long time because I was more obsessed with modern culture. So I think your videos really have an impact and people see you infusing them with love, like just how your mom infuses everything with love. They see your soul going through the videos, music, art, literature. It's really powerful, and I think your YouTube channel itself feels like a work of art. When you look at it, it's beautiful. It sounds beautiful. It's visually appealing. I think you're just a master producer at things, and your videos kind of market themselves just in the way you create them.
Well, thank you. That was very nice of you. And you actually captured kind of what I was thinking. I can't ever make this popular. I just don't have the resources or the knowledge or skill, but I can make it, like you said, a work of art, something good that helps people, that they'll enjoy, that's beautiful, that shows them this better side of life. You know what I'm saying? In all our lives, we have to go through some difficult times. All of us have ups and downs and some sad moments, but we can also appreciate all these good things. And it's part of it. It's like, just like there's negative feedback cycles that are detrimental, there's positive feedback cycles. Good music, good art, good literature, learning how to prevent and cure diseases. All of this is part of good stuff. And so, I try to nurture that.
Yeah. And one of the comments to one of your videos said that we should make some sort of like musical or something, like some sort of theater performance. A lot of your analogies are quite theatrical and they lend themselves to that, such as talking about the seven circles of hell and how they relate to
Yeah, I
that
had fun with that. And it's true. Yeah.
Your creativity really shines. Someone was wondering about your day job. So what you do 5 days a week. What gets you excited about it? What makes a day a good day?
Yeah. Okay. One last thing too is I also have studied, I was very interested in what makes a great author, what makes a great genius, and what makes a great artist. And one of the things is trusting yourself. You get a gut feeling. This is funny. This is good. I just go with it. And I'll just have an idea. I'll write down in a note card to myself, make a video about this. Okay. I come home, boom, go. So I like doing that. And that's, I think, also why I only speak if I'm interested in something. Something catches my interest. I just make the video. I go with and I often do it right away because I know you have this feeling, and this feeling is only going to last a certain amount of time, a day, a week, or something. Make it right when you're interested, because when you're interested in it, like you said, there's something about your voice that just has emotion into it, and that makes the video better. And that's the time when it's fresh. Okay. Then you asked me something. What was the next question again?
It was about someone wants to know about your day job. What makes you excited about it? What makes a day a good day?
Okay, so what do I actually do? The main thing I do is I work as a neuroradiologist, which means mostly reading brain MRIs. I also read spines and necks, and I do some neuro-related procedures, neck biopsies, myelograms, lumbar punctures, that sort of thing. My favorite part of my day, though, there's two things there's actually three things I actually like. My favorite part is if I get a complex case. I got some, doctor buddies who I really like talking to, and they're very interested in all these subtle nuance things about the brain. So we have really good conversations. We can look at each other's films through a computer system, and then we sit there and we talk about the case. This reminds me of this. This reminds me of this. This reminds me of this. What do you think of this? I think it's this. And then we go through all. So that is a lot of fun for me, because that's sort of like something I'm heavily into. Like if you met a doctor who knew me, they go, yeah, that guy really knows brain diseases. That's what they would say about me. So that's fun. I like it when doctors come by to visit me to go over their cases. Like a lot of times doctors will come to me, they'll knock on my office door and they're like, hey, can you go over this case for me? And we'll go through a lot, because they only bring me the good stuff. Because when I'm really working, I'm going through everything. A lot of it's pretty boring, the same old pathetic stuff, tons of diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis. That's endless. Every hospital in the entire Western world, as soon as the door opens in the morning, it's like a river floods in. Hypertension, diabetes, obesity, atherosclerosis, dementia, coronary artery disease, nonstop. So I could do that stuff with, my eyes closed. It's so common. Versus the more interesting, nuanced stuff is a lot of fun to talk about. And they always bring good stuff to me. They wouldn't come to me if they were able to figure out the case on their own through routine methods. So I really enjoy talking about those complex cases with them. I also like it sometimes when people want me to teach them, because it's sort of like I spent all this time learning all this stuff. It's nice to teach. I actually think I should have taught more. I would love to have a university position and teach, but it's not that easy to make it all work. So I'm kind of hoping to do that more in the future. if I had enough money, I would even retire and just be a professor and teach and do research. I actually think they should put people like me in an institute and let us just study all day and research. But, it is what it is. But that's sort of like the most fun things for me. A lot of it is just crank out the work, grind it out. You got to generate all your billing codes for the day like any doctor. And I do the best I can. I do little things. For example, when I make my reports, I intentionally format them as clear as possible. I sort of like have a pride in that. For example, I want whatever doctor comes the next day or follows up with this patient in a couple of months to say, wow, what a nice report. That was Rogers. You know what I mean? And I've had a lot of doctors say stuff that to me, like, my reports are just the best. They're awesome. I've had neurology residents tell me the way to learn neuroradiology is to read Dr. Rogers' reports. Okay, you're a legend in neuroradiology. I've had residents and attendings say all kinds of things like that to me, which I like. Of course, they're being nice, but what I'm trying to say is, if you just crank out the billing codes, you'll sometimes get a little bored or even feel sad. Why am I doing this? I'm just cranking out billing codes. I wish I was doing something better or bigger. But when I mess around, like I'll format them, I'll specifically use semicolons to keep everything connected. I play games with it. What I'm saying is everybody works and everybody has a certain functional level. If every day you try to do things a little bit better, you keep on slowly getting a little better. Versus if you just go through the motions trying to get it over with all the work you have to do, you'll gradually lose knowledge and get worse and deteriorate. Because there's an old joke, a lot of old docs turn into what's called a Gomer doc. Somebody who never reads or studies anymore, knows how to go through the motions, but really has no unique insights. And so by pushing yourself every day, keep on trying to do a little better. Like when I come across something I don't know, I make myself look it up. Even if it means I go home half an hour late, I'll look it up because I want to keep improving. But that's kind of like what it takes. You have to sort of pay a price. And the price you pay is typically time. You look something up and you figure it out, but then you got it. And so you keep on building knowledge. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And as a teacher, you're preaching the, low-fat vegan diet all the time. Does it ever get tiring to keep saying the same message again and again?
Well, you try to help people. My attitude is I give them a chance. I don't really expect much from people. Most people are kind of lazy and they don't have a lot of curiosity. They don't have enough energy to really learn something. But I'm like, it's like the low-fat, low-sodium vegan diet. It's not that hard to learn. The real challenge is the obstacle is to unlearn all the stuff that they learned through their life. They were taught when they were young, eat meat to become big and strong like lions and tigers and bears, all this stuff. You need iron like Popeye, all this other stuff. You need your calcium, your protein. You know how it is. And so the hard part is to unlearn all that stuff. So they have to have mental flexibility to let go of that old stuff. And they have to have enough curiosity. They have to have enough humility that they can handle that transformation. And surprisingly, most people can't. So my attitude is, look, I'll give you a chance. Okay. You want to be fat and stupid. You'll have a million of people like you, but that's really not much of an ambition for life, So, and I notice things that'll happen. Like I'll see my kids. They like, if you'd asked them 10 years ago, go, Dad, you're kind of crazy. Nobody's going to eat like that. And my wife would say, you're an effing robot. You're going to eat no one's going to be like you. And then the more time goes by, the more like, well, gee, the old man, he's so much healthier and younger looking than all our friends' dads. Maybe he's right. And then some of the people who leave comments on his videos, they think he's smart. Maybe he's right. I go, yeah, of course I'm right. So anyways, that happened. I've seen that happen over the last, 10, 15 years. The older they get, the more they want to be like me. When they were young, there was a little bit of an attitude in my house. Oh, Dad, he's kind of autistic, Asperger or something. We don't know, all this, vegetarian stuff, no way. I'm going to lift weights. And so they gradually see, the more time goes by, the more they see it my way.
Yeah. Chef AJ has said this too, but we really need to get you in contact with Dr. Goldhammer. Like both of you are very similar people in terms of temperament and also just ability to stick to an A+ diet. And you're both very ahead of your time because Dr. Goldhammer became vegan over 40 years ago and was preaching the message and nobody listened to him, but he didn't care. He was okay with being an outcast and a trailblazer. Sometime we'll have that conversation happen.
Yeah, because I talk to doctors all the time. I've never met a single doctor who can even have a conversation with me. None of them. I don't know any of them. And I know guys, they're all these AOAs, top 10% in their class. None of them has read the medical literature. Not a single one. They've all read the medical textbooks. They all know whatever you need to know to take your test to generate your billing codes. But not a single one of them has, if you want to understand atherosclerosis, you have to go through the hemoradiology literature. You have to read stuff by pathologists. And so it takes a lot of time and effort. And it was just because of my personal situation that I had the time and I had the desire. And then I enjoyed it because I could do it. But I'm telling you, this is rare stuff.
Yeah, incredibly rare, which is why you're like a diamond in a mine. And the last question that someone had is, what did you learn while raising kids, and what would you do differently?
Well, obviously, every parent, you look back on it, you did some things right, but you made a lot of mistakes. I'll tell you one mistake I made. One of my kids was real good at tennis, and I did some good things. I had a wall in my backyard. He could hit tennis balls against it, and that was great. And the kid had talent. He won like a 46-man team tournament. But then he had to go to a bigger neighborhood but they had more professional teachers of tennis, and it was a bit of a drive to get him over there. At that time, I was a surgeon, and I was on call every other night. I was exhausted. I couldn't drive him. My wife had to work. She couldn't drive him. Grandma didn't want to drive him. We had nobody to drive him. So I should have paid somebody to drive the kid, because he's a smart kid. He's watching videos on the internet or TV. He sees Andre Agassi's, going to Florida. He sees Pete Sampras going to California to improve when they're teenagers. And he goes, "You guys aren't going to give me a ride to the club?" He goes, "Well, then screw this. I'm not going to play tennis." And he smashed his racket. Yeah, and I was kind of sad, and he quit, which was a waste because the kid was really good. He ended up rejoining the team in high school. He went downstate and, did real well. But I screwed up. Okay, that's one screw up. I should have got him a ride right away. I was too distracted and exhausted. I used to work, come home at night, every night, like 9 o'clock at night. I was covering 3 hospitals. I was on call all the time. And then I gradually changed my job so I would have more time. I still work a lot, but not like I used to. What else did I screw up? I got the kids into drawing, and they all took drawing class, and I'm very glad I did it. That was one of the best things I did as a parent. And partly that came out of my own, a lot of parents have their kids do something out of their own frustration or their own mistake. I wish I had played tennis when I was young, but I thought tennis was for wimps. My parents both played, and I was a wrestler, a tough guy. So I'm like, I'm not going to play some wimpy freaking tennis sport. That's for sissies, But then I wish I had, because you can do it your whole life. I don't wrestle anymore. I wish I did. But so then the next thing was drawing. I had wanted to write a couple books, but I didn't know how to draw. And they needed drawings, and I didn't have money or time to contact an illustrator and work it all out. So I just didn't write the book. Okay. And so what I'm saying is, like, I don't want that to happen to my kids. So I had them in drawing because I figured drawing is a great thing. You can connect it to whatever else you do. It doesn't matter what you like. Anything can be connected to drawing. So my kids got pretty good at drawing. Had some arguments with my wife, though, because my wife and I are philosophically different. I'm more of a creative, artistic person, if you will, in an intellectual sense. And she is more of like just a bread and butter doctor. And she's like, you're going to drive these kids crazy. You want them to be a couple bohemians in New York, starving artists. Art is bullshit. There's no money in art. And I'm like, no, it's a beautiful thing. They can connect to other things. So anyways, she kind of discouraged them a little. And I didn't like that because she thought that I was pulling them away. She kind of wanted them to get good grades in school and become a doctor, and you'll be set for life. And I was kind of like, no. I'm a big believer that you develop the mind indirectly, if you will. If you do projects that you like, if you spend time with whatever it is that you're interested in, you develop the ability to learn everything else. But you have that interest propels you to higher levels. And if you can draw, that's a form of communication. Anything you write the rest of your life, any paper you hand in school, it'll be better. You'll learn other things from learning how to draw and make observations. You become more observant. You'll be a better photographer. You'll just be better at a lot of things if you learn this art. I just knew that. And anyways, the kids had a lot of talent for it and they liked it, but she kind of discouraged it. I should have pushed it a little harder. It was hard for me to push things, though, because whatever family lives closer, they control things. We live right next to my wife's family, her mother, her sister's around. And she spent more time with the kids than I did because I'm working a lot. So she had more control of the kids than I did. I should have pushed harder because they gradually drifted away from the art. Then they come back to it, but they've lost a couple of years in developing that talent. So I screwed up a little there, but at least I'm glad I got them going with that. I got them a little bit into nature. I love nature. I was going to be a wildlife biologist before I was going to be a doctor, or I even considered being a wildlife veterinarian. So I got them out going. We should have gone bird watching more. You learn about biology and nature from bird watching, because all of a sudden, that's how the guy who discovered the DNA structure, James Watson, got started in biology. It's the fastest way to have a good experience in biology. You get out in the woods or some nature center, some marshland or pond. I used to love going to the Palo Alto Baylands. And you look at all the birds and you start identifying them. You learn how to watch their behavior, how to identify them from their wings, and all this other stuff. I should have had my kids do more of that. We did some of it, but in a way, like initially I was all gung-ho about being a surgeon. And then gradually I had gone into surgery because I felt it kind of kept me in touch with all of medicine. But I gradually saw that I'd be better off going into neuroradiology. And I'd always wanted to do brains because I studied the brain. So once I started doing more neuroradiology, I had more time. And then I could spend more time with my kids. They were older then. For example, I should have got them into wrestling. Because they're with my wife's family more than with me, they kind of, a lot of people look down on wrestling because they don't understand it. But once they got a little older, they wanted to, but it's hard. The best thing is you should start young, then you're better than everybody else. If you wait till high school to start, you got a disadvantage. And my kid got a ringworm infection. He also, he wimped out. The other kid had ringworm. And I told him, teaching him to be mentally strong. Well, then you just say, no, I'm not going to wrestle that kid. But the coach pressured him. He wrestled the kid. He got ringworm, and it took a while to get bad. Then he had to quit. Because my kid was very athletic. He could have been a state champion. But he had to quit because of the ringworm. So that was sad. So stuff like that happens. You probably heard me talk about my old house. My old house was great. I designed my old house, and I should have kept the damn place. I had a tennis court in the backyard. I had a full-length basketball court. I had a pool in the backyard. I had an animal enclosure. We had all these animals. We used to have turtles and chickens and geese and rabbits, you name it. We had because it was a kind of a big place. It was my place, my house. Inside, I converted a room into a racquetball court. I converted another room. What pissed my wife off through the roof was I made the living room into a basketball court. And that's because my kid, he came home from school one day and he's like, Dad, you're a bad parent. I'm like, why am I a bad parent? And he said, because you don't help me with basketball. My friend's dad is the coach of the team. My other friend's dad is the assistant coach. My other friend's dad, he practices with his kid. He goes, all you do is work all the time. And I go, well, buddy, maybe I could help you. And so I had a carpenter friend board up the windows. We were just using our living room for storage. We had a wood floor, a high ceiling. We put in a basketball court. The kid practiced 3.5 hours a day. He became a star of the team. All right. He ended up in high school arguing with one of his coaches. The kid's pretty tall. He would have been a good basketball player, but then he quit. But it was still very good for him. But my wife, an apeshit banana, she's like, you asshole, you've ruined the house. You're going to destroy the foundation. I'm embarrassed to have a friend come over. My wife is almost like an interior decorator, is like a hobby of hers. So for her to have a house where the living room is a basketball court, that pissed her off. So I'm like, you should be glad. We've got you don't need to join the health club. It's all right here. And the kids loved it. The older ones are playing basketball. The little ones are riding their bicycles and tricycles around. I loved it. And the house wasn't that expensive. I know it sounds like all this stuff. It must be multiple millions. No, it wasn't, because it was rural. And when you're rural, I had a little bit longer drive to work, but I didn't care. A rural house, everything is cheap. The farther you go from a big city, the cheaper everything is. I actually recommend live as far away from a big city as you can. Big cities stink, in my opinion. Tons of pollution, tons of traffic, tons of stress, tons of crime. They're not worth it. Okay, so anyways, though, my wife got all pissed off and insisted on moving to another house. And I felt for the kids' sake I should stay with her. I wish I divorced her and stayed in my old house. The kids would have all wanted to come over to be in that house. But I went with her, for the sake of the kids. And that's what happened. So that's another thing that she just could not see it my way. My wife's a doctor, but she's not like an intellectual doctor like I am. I'm like as smart as a doctor could be. Okay, not to brag, but it's true. And she's like a sort of a regular doctor. And I know she meant well. She wanted the best for the kids, but her whole mindset was she worked very hard. She got her grade. She became a doctor. She practiced as a doctor. Whereas I'm more like creative. I wanted to do something interesting, creative. I wanted to discover a new disease. I wanted to, you know what I'm saying? I'm sort of more like that. I don't really care. I mean, I just crank out the busy work because every doctor has to do that. But that's not what fascinates me. I don't care much about the money. The whole family spends all my money more than I do. I pretty much just buy books. But what else? I got the kids to read, and I screwed up initially with them because I would keep buying them books, and they would never read anything I read. And I'm like, how come you don't want to read these books? Then I learned. I didn't understand. I had to let them pick the books. Once they picked all their own books, then they would tend to read them. Because then when you pick the book yourself, it's an adventure. You make a prediction. You see if the prediction matches. It's fun. When an old man tells you, read this book, it's kind of like, yeah, read it yourself,
Wow, thank you. That was a lot of incredible lessons that will help people with raising their kids. Thank you so much for your time today. It was very enlightening as always. It feels like you educate us not just on medicine, of course, but how to live a good and virtuous life. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Have a great day.